KABC. It's an honor to welcome our esteemed panel and audience to this important discussion today on the new infrastructure bill. And we're going to be talking about it. So one issue apparently that's united Democrats and Republicans in Washington. Apparently everyone agrees that the country's falling apart and we need to fix it. So we're here to talk about what's in it for you with our esteemed panelists here today. Thank you very much to our hosts here at Cal U in beautiful Westlake Village. It's wonderful, beautiful day here today and perfect venue for this discussion. We're going to learn from our panel of experts about the new infrastructure bill currently under discussion in Washington, and then we'll be hearing about what's in it for you and how millions, even billions of those dollars will be deployed locally here in Southern California. Bridges, broadband, you name it, all included in this bill. And before we get started now, let me thank our sponsors today: Agrumon, Deloitte, Five Threads Brewing, Hub 101, Parker Brown Construction, PureTech Water, and VCEDA. Thank you very much to all of our sponsors for making this possible here today. Now let me turn to this esteemed panel for a quick self-introduction round. Let's start with the Congresswoman who's in town here today. Congresswoman, thank you very much for joining us, and go ahead and introduce yourself and we'll take it right down the line.
Thank you, Frank. I'm Julia Brownley. I am the Congresswoman for the 26th Congressional District right here in Ventura County.
And I am Jacqui Irwin. I am the Assemblymember who represents you up in Sacramento.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Fabien Reille. I'm the CEO and founder of Homesteady, and we are a commercial contractor.
Good afternoon. Gerhard Apfelthaler, Dean of the School of Management at California Lutheran University, 10th ranked university according to US News and World Report, and the other person with an accent on the panel.
Good afternoon. I'm Darren Kettle. I am currently the executive director of the Ventura County Transportation Commission for about another 3 weeks. And then I head to Los Angeles, where I'll become the next chief executive officer of Metrolink, the regional rail system for Southern California.
Hello, I'm Sandy Smith. I'm from my day job, I'm a land use project manager for Sesame Consulting, and I'm also the policy chair for the Ventura County Economic Development Association.
Good afternoon. My name is Mercy Urrea. I'm a representative for the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters. I represent the carpenters here in Ventura County, along with Santa Barbara County and San Luis Obispo County.
Thank you very much to all of our panel. And let me reintroduce Congresswoman Brownley and invite her to the podium for a presentation on the new infrastructure bill and what's in it for you. Congresswoman Brownley.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you for moderating today's discussion. And thank you, John Lockhart from People Media Worldwide for the invitation this afternoon. And last, a big thanks to Cal Lutheran for hosting today's forum and this important conversation with not only tremendous national and statewide impacts, but substantial impact right here in Ventura County. I very much appreciate the opportunity to engage with our panelists to highlight what's on Congress's agenda to make bold, once-in-a-generation and transformative investments in our nation's infrastructure, in my opinion, critical investments for our nation's future. As a member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, I've been working with my colleagues for more than a year to develop the next surface transportation reauthorization bill, which we wanted it to be a long-term bill that covers investments in highways, bridges, transit systems, and rail, and equally as important to lay critical foundations toward a clean energy economic future. In early July, the House passed the Invest in America Act, a 5-year, $547 billion surface transportation reauthorization bill, coupled with more than $50 billion in investments in clean water infrastructure and more than $105 billion for drinking water infrastructure. In the House, we have also advanced other infrastructure legislation to invest in broadband technology deployment, our airports, our waterways and ports, water storage and delivery, schools, and a lot more. If you've been tracking the national news, as I'm sure all of you have, you're aware that President Biden announced last week that the White House and a bipartisan group of senators had reached an agreement on their own infrastructure package. That deal proposes $550 billion in new investments in infrastructure, plus another $650 billion in ongoing funds, getting you to that $1.2 trillion infrastructure investment that is most referenced as the top line number for the bipartisan Senate bill. Of course, we in the House believe our Invest in America Act is the better bill for many, many reasons, but the most important reason is that it includes detailed policies and guardrails, so appropriated resources will be spent strategically, particularly when it comes to infrastructure resiliency and carbon reduction. Having said that, I believe at this moment the Senate bill will be the vehicle that moves through Congress, although I can't guarantee if that is going to be the case, but that is what I believe it to be at this moment in time. As of the weekend, the Senate completed a 2,700-page draft bill based on the agreed upon framework. Yesterday, they began amendments on the Senate floor, and hopefully that process can be completed quickly and smoothly. As you know, the Senate filibuster rule requires 60 votes to pass before it can move to the House, so the amendment process needs to go smoothly. Simultaneously, I will say, behind the scenes, there is a lot of work going on to build consensus amongst Senate Democrats on a reconciliation budget bill that will require the support of every Democratic senator and the vice president, and hopefully Republicans as well, in order for it to move to the House. Meanwhile, the Speaker of the House has been very clear that the House will only take up the infrastructure bill when we can simultaneously take up the reconciliation bill. So the reconciliation bill will need every senator and a majority of Democrats in the House. Getting consensus in the House will be a major feat. We currently only have a 3-vote margin, which means only 2 Democrats can vote against it in order for it to pass. Ultimately, we will need to reconcile the House passed legislation with the Senate passed legislation, and it still remains to be seen how this all comes together. It will, but it is hard to see the path at the moment. You may have heard that there happens to be a lot of different opinions, even among Democrats, amongst all of these bills. So building consensus is going to be challenging, but I hope successful. And as Winston Churchill once said, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. So it's not usually linear, and you rarely make everyone happy. And there are lots of ups and downs, but I'm optimistic we will indeed get there. That said, the details do matter. The details matter for state and local governments who desperately need this funding for infrastructure repairs and upgrades, and transportation planners who need flexibility to put funds towards local needs and priorities. The details also matter for ordinary Americans who are stuck in traffic, who send their kids to crumbling schools, who need access to broadband more than ever before to work and stay engaged in the digital globalized economy. The details matter for businesses, both large and small, who rely on our infrastructure for their supply chains, for their customers, and for their continued prosperity. The details matter for American workers, for whom infrastructure investments means jobs, and it means good paying jobs. And the details matter for our future, because we only have one planet and we must protect it for generations to come. I am also a member of the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis, and I firmly believe that this infrastructure package needs to focus resources not only on fixing our broken infrastructure, which is really, really, really important, but I also believe that every federal dollar we invest needs to be invested with an eye towards resiliency and towards reducing carbon emissions and toward building a clean energy economy. Because we simply cannot pave our way out of traffic problems, transit and rail are critically important investments as well. Here in Ventura County, we know this all too well. The 101, our county's main street, is more congested than ever before, and we need to provide more options. And of course, one good example would be expanding Metrolink services for commuters taking more cars off the freeway. I said that expressly for you, Darren. As home to the Port of Hueneme, the only deep water port between Los Angeles and San Francisco, we also know how important goods movement and freight efficiency are for jobs in our community, for our agricultural industry, and for regional economic growth. So let me close by simply saying that I look forward to this important discussion. I look forward to your questions, and I look forward to passing a very robust infrastructure package at the federal level to help our cities and Ventura County as a whole recover from the pandemic, create jobs, and propel our economy forward. As Mr. Churchill also said, a pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. So I will remain optimistic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Julia Brownley, for that comprehensive presentation on the new infrastructure bill. It's now an honor to introduce State Assemblymember Jacqui Irwin. Want to welcome her to the podium. Known as Mayor Irwin in these parts, former mayor of Thousand Oaks, Assemblymember Jacqui Irwin.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really glad to be here after everything that we've experienced in the last year. It's really exciting to be able to talk about the opportunities that will greatly benefit our region. I'm heartened to see so many people, especially at the federal level, recognizing that infrastructure is a very broad category where jobs, education, and projects need to come together to achieve our goals. What is happening at the federal level is very encouraging. To make projects a reality requires a strong workforce. So we need to make sure that we have the education programs to make that happen. A few years ago, we were able to get money in the budget to start the engineering program at Cal State Channel Islands. And that's because the demand for engineers in this region is high. There are hundreds of jobs available every year. New funding for infrastructure projects will only increase that demand. And our universities are a tremendous asset to our region and to the state, producing the talented workforce required to support our businesses. In the just adopted state budget, we were able to get $5 million, which we hope all comes to Ventura County for rapid digital upskilling for displaced workers. It will provide skills to empower workers for careers in growth industries, including IT, communications, clean tech, life and health sciences, and critical infrastructure. And California's new budget includes a historic investment in expanded broadband access. The pandemic has more than demonstrated the necessity for every Californian to have reliable access in order to function in today's world. More than 90% of our residents have high-speed internet, but hundreds of thousands of students still do not have reliable internet access at home. The state will partner with existing providers as well as local governments and agencies to build and maintain new broadband lines, prioritizing the underserved and unserved areas, facilities, households, and businesses that remain unconnected in this digital era. Regardless of where the funding is coming from, competition is huge. Programs and projects that have detailed plans that are what we call shovel ready are going to move up on the list. The Rice Avenue grade separation is a good example. When we had the opportunity for some state funding, we knew the data. We knew the plans and we knew the local knowledge because we talked to people in our community. And when that funding was available, we were able to access what is going to be close to $120 million from making sure that the legislature and the administration were educated on the need for the Rice Avenue grade separation in our area. So I continue to look forward to working with all of you and with Congresswoman Brownley to ensure that our region is successful in receiving federal funding to improve the lives of our residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, State Assemblymember Jacqui Irwin. All right, let's get to some questions here, and let me start with Darren Kettle. First of all, Executive Director of the Ventura County Transportation Commission, as you heard, the new CEO at Metrolink. Before I lose my thought of train, tell us about how this is going to impact the rail system and transportation here in this area.
Thank you, Frank. First of all, I want to say that I don't know that we could find anybody in Sacramento or Washington, D.C. that are greater champions for infrastructure in Ventura County than the two ladies that are joining us on the panel today. Congresswoman Brownley, in her role serving on the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, has led on any number of fronts, and Assemblymember Jacqui Irwin was absolutely a pit bull when it came to the Rice Avenue grade separation project and making sure that we improve safety on our rail system in Ventura County. So thank you very much for your hard efforts. So yeah, so rail, the infrastructure packages are huge for passenger rail, certainly. I'm still wearing my VCTC hat for another few weeks, so there's some good stuff in there for highways and bus transit as well as active transportation and broadband. But this administration, the Biden administration, sees the value, the importance of passenger rail in our country. And so we're at a very opportune time to see that materialize when it comes to passenger rail. My last comment before I turn over the mic is that Congresswoman Brownley said, well, there's the Senate's package that may be the one that moves over the House package. And my only response is, let's get them both. That's what we need for our country's future. And now that's probably asking, that's a really big ask. But nonetheless, it's something that we see, and we really do appreciate your leadership on it, Congresswoman.
Thank you very much. Let's turn the mic over to Sandy Smith, the policy chair of the VCEDA, member of the Workforce Development Board. Jobs, a big part of all this. Tell us what this is going to mean for jobs in the center.
Well, I'm not sure about the jobs, other than the fact that VCEDA, the Ventura County Economic Development Association, has long recognized the importance of our infrastructure to our local economy. As echoing Darren's comments about our representatives, I was speaking, I have the utmost respect for them. And so, to no surprise, they've anticipated both my questions. And I did take the time to write them down. So the first question is, as long as we view broadband similar to electricity as something to be provided by the private sector, VCEDA believes we'll struggle coming up with a system that can provide universally accessible services at an affordable rate. We've learned locally due to COVID and other emergencies that extending this service to everyone is of great import. A recent AP article made it clear about the politics. How soon until we can see some real progress?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Progress in terms of
Broadband access, greater access, and funding to broadband.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, if we can pass this infrastructure bill, there is a tremendous amount of money in the bill for broadband. Can we flip the switch overnight? No, it's going to take some time, but I think that this will make a huge step with regards to making sure that we have access to the internet, whether you're in a big city, whether you're rural, whether you're rich or poor. So I think it's, broadband is one of the issues back in Washington that is universally supported. So I have no doubt that this is going to move forward. And I think it will make a huge impact.
And the state really did this year make an unprecedented investment in broadband. And I just want to sort of echo what you're talking about. What the pandemic really unveiled is a very big income inequality, the divide between the haves and have-nots. When we look at our children that have not been at school, and then we look at children from wealthier neighborhoods that have had every opportunity given to them in spite of the pandemic, we know that that is a threat to our democracy. So there will be some effort to seeing how the money is allocated, how quickly it can get out. But I'll tell you, in the legislature, and it sounds like in Congress too, this is a #1 priority to make sure that rural areas have access and to make sure that that urban areas have access. They might have the infrastructure there, but they're not able to hook into the internet. So we will continue to work hard to make this happen.
Appreciate that answer. I just say that at VCEDA, our board now recognizes the importance of social equity. It's a real priority for us in terms of the businesses that we represent, and the realization that we're not going to get there with our local economy unless everybody comes up. So that's really a philosophy that we've embraced. Last question. Throughout the pandemic, we've experienced many challenges, and you've expressed your awareness of what's going on at the port, but there are also opportunities. The ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach are experiencing massive delays as ships line up and wait offshore to unload and load cargo. The Port of Hueneme, with your help, both of you, has undertaken a massive program of investment to not only deepen the harbor itself, but for site expansion. The operation of the port is a key piece of our local economy, if not one of the cornerstones. The operation of the port, there's a huge opportunity for more exporting. And there's a huge, but transit to the port, as we know, needs to be enhanced to assess the transportation grid. What can be done to make sure that funds are available for improving the important connection to the grid?
Well, I will say again, the infrastructure bill that is under consideration right now is going to be the Port of Hueneme would benefit tremendously. I am very proud of the Port of Hueneme. I'm very proud to represent the Port of Hueneme. I brag about the Port of Hueneme all the time back in Washington. It is, it's a unique port in that it's growing. And it's growing in a very clean way. They have made tremendous investments. I was happy to actually get the resources needed to actually deepen the port. So now bigger ships will be able to come in. But it is, as you said, it's really important that the transportation corridors coming into the port, whether it's rails, roads, we need to improve upon. I will say two pieces that, I'm not going to get into all of the details of the infrastructure bill, at least in the Invest in America Act that came out of the House. I was able to get two component pieces in there for the Port of Hueneme. There were two sort of transportation grants, one existing grant where there was more money in it for transportation, but ports were not included in terms of gaining access to those resources. If that language passes, the port will have access. We developed a whole new program for transportation within the bill. And for any port, Port Hueneme being a smaller port, has been left out of some resources because of the weight of their annual weight of cargo. So we were able to kind of reduce that threshold. So now that the Port of Hueneme, including a few other ports across the country, will now have access to those resources that the larger ports have. Yeah.
Congressman, thank you very much. And Sandy, thank you very much for bringing your passion to this panel here today. And certainly people in the construction business are very excited about all of this. And with us also is Fabien Reille, the CEO of Homesteady, a construction contractor here in this area. Fabien, let me get your reaction to what's proposed here and what's this going to mean for your business here in this area, please.
Yes, thank you. Well, I believe it's a great opportunity, actually. It's going to create a lot of projects, a lot of opportunities for us to hire more people. It's not easy to hire these days. I'm finding that fight every day uphill. I'm not the only one. I just heard that McDonald's, for example, they just have a $500 bonus if you stay for 90 days as an employee. So it's difficult, it's hard to do, but the influx of money we're going to see coming for all those projects will impact us on the private sector. I'm going to take the example of EV chargers, electric vehicle chargers. That's a simple example where I have a lot of customers telling me I'm happy to install EV chargers left and right, provide that to my tenants, to the people living here in this space, but I need a solid grid so it doesn't create outages locally first, and second, everybody is aware that there has been some programs, LADWP and others, that were funding the installation and the purchase of those chargers. So I believe the bill can also trickle down to that level where it helps, just us overall on the EV charger front, and I believe it's good.
And sitting next to you is Dr. Gerhard, the Dean of the School of Management here at Cal-Lu. Dr. Apfelthaler, thank you very much for hosting us here today. And obviously, training and education, also a component of all this. Give us your reaction to this new infrastructure bill.
Well, thank you, Frank. We're of course proud and happy to host this event. And I should probably start also by saying that I am excited about the new spending bill. It's absolutely the right thing to do. You know, being European, having traveled far and frequently, I have a comparative perspective, and I know that the U.S. infrastructure needs upgrading. As an educator and the dean of a business school, am I super excited about the hard infrastructure bill? Well, I have to say there's not much in there for education, of course, right? So I think in education, we are looking forward to the soft infrastructure bill. That is going to include a lot more benefits and programs and opportunities for education. It's still going to be a long shot, I think, with the focus on early childhood education, but the tide raises all boats, right? Lifts all boats. So I think ultimately the soft infrastructure bill is going to have a long lasting benefit for education.
Certainly this is going to mean work for carpenters and others here in this region. So let's bring in Urrea, the regional manager of the Southwest Regional Council of Carpenters. So welcome and give us your reaction here to this.
Well, thank you. We appreciate being here. It's an honor to be up here with our political leaders here in the county, and it's a great thing. We're really pushing for the infrastructure bill with us and the carpenters and all the trades. We've been really active on social media and just sending letters to our congressmen and women and everybody throughout Southern California. A lot of the members here in Ventura County, they utilize the work in that infrastructure field. They do a lot of heavy highway work. They work in the water industry. They build the schools. They work on the rails. They're working at the ports. We would like to see some more projects come locally, and we'd like to see some language to protect the workers and try to keep more workers working locally. A lot of times they do what they have to do to travel to the work, and we travel to LA County or Santa Barbara County, spending 2 to 3 hours a day on the road. So when the projects come here locally, it would be great to have some incentives for like skilled and trained and local hire and local apprentices and keep people closer to work so they can enjoy the day after they work a hard day. So
Let's stay on that.
appreciate that.
For a while, from a laborer's viewpoint, what kinds of infrastructure investment you think would best benefit this area?
Like I said, everybody wants to open up the freeways and the highways and make things a little bit more roomier and try to get from point A to point B. That would be great. Our schools, our kids need upgrades in all their schools. So I know a lot of family members and children like to have some upgrades in their schools. Some things we're also talking about with expanding the port. With a lot of the offshore wind, possibility of offshore wind projects coming into our area. We got to talk about like opening the port of Hueneme. They're talking about the port of LA and the port of Long Beach, but the areas that they're looking to first do this offshore wind projects are the Vandenberg or Diablo, and the main point or the halfway point is Port Hueneme. So I think if we can come up with a plan to utilize local people at the port and have that be a place where we design or help build or have that those projects have to stop here and put people to work here at the port of Hueneme and then take them up there. Offshore wind energy is going to be the new big thing. And if we're decommissioning power plants and decommissioning some other things, we should look at utilizing that infrastructure here locally and putting people to work and utilizing our ports and our local workforce.
Voice of business for this area, Sandy Smith, the sponsorship of VCEDA. Any other thoughts about the priorities and infrastructure and investments, and what do you think would best benefit this area?
Well, I'm going to just lean on everybody that just spoke. I mean, I think that they've articulated, I think, VCEDA's position pretty clearly. So I'll rest on the comments of my colleagues.
All right, and let me ask, bring in Darren Kettle again with Metrolink, and more specifically, are we going to see a big expansion of the rail system improvements? So what can the folks here expect in the future?
Well, currently we're about 7 years away from the 2028 Olympic and Paralympic Games. And I believe that this is our opportunity. You don't just simply go and wave a wand and have a transportation system that moves the level of participation and the level of attendance that we're going to have in Southern California for the 2028 games. So this is our opportunity to do more with rail. I've said a few times that I'm excited about joining Metrolink as their CEO. It's an antiquated system. It is built around a commuter. It took people to Los Angeles, and that's pretty much all it did. If we don't, and if we're not prepared to expand the system to take it beyond commuters, looking at leisure travel, recreational travel, every other way that we're able to need to take care of a trip, not just into Los Angeles, but to Ventura County instead of the other way around, we will have missed that opportunity. And because we have the Olympic Games coming to Los Angeles in 2028, not only are we seeing support from the federal government, but the budget bill that Assemblymember Irwin spoke about includes $1 billion for transportation infrastructure directly related to the 2028 games. So this is our chance to take rail to a whole other level. And I'm excited about getting to walk into that and have an opportunity to plan it and execute it.
There's much talk about the famous bullet train part of the equation that is mentioned in this bill, and what do we expect from that?
So in the various pieces of legislation, one of the things I learned as the executive director at VCTC is stay in your lane. So actually, in both packages right now, high-speed rail is relatively silent in both the state budget bill as well as what's being talked about in the bipartisan package on the Senate side. And Congresswoman Brownley will correct me if I'm wrong on the invest side, but not, again, a whole lot of high-speed rail with one proviso, and that's the Northeast Corridor. It's the segment that goes from Washington, D.C. up to New York, where there is substantial investment in the bipartisan infrastructure package. But right now, it's pretty silent on California's high-speed rail program.
I have so much that I want to respond to everybody's comments, but what Darren just said, I just wanted to add two things. One is myself and a couple of other Southern California congressional members were able to put in an amendment in the Invest in America Act to provide transportation planning resources for the 2028 Olympics too. So there's a sort of an additional pot of money there. The bill, the Invest in America Act, the bipartisan Senate, the advantage of the Invest in America Act is, as I said in my opening remarks, it has all of the policy pieces in there. There's not a lot of policy on the Senate side. So we just want to make sure that these dollars are directed appropriately. But I will say that the Senate did a better job on transit than they did at the very beginning. They almost had $0 in there for transit, where on the Invest in America, we had $90 billion. I mean, it was like a tenfold increase over and above, what we have ever done before in the past. And so, we don't, although we're trying to do earmarks again in Congress, but we really don't do earmarks in legislation. So we don't highlight one specific transportation piece, but there is a lot of transit dollars in both bills. The language in the Invest in America bill is created to say that we want to fix all of our hard infrastructure out there, but we don't want to start adding more and more lanes to freeways. We want to invest those dollars into transit. So those dollars actually would go or could go to high-speed rail to support that too, although we don't highlight it in the bill because we don't do that in Congress. So,
Assemblymember Irwin, you want to respond to that?
Well, I won't say too much about high-speed rail, except that the Assembly has really been pushing back this year. The planning has not been that great, and a lot of people didn't really buy into the idea of this section right in the middle of Central Valley. But certainly the idea that we work with the San Francisco area where we have a lot of commuters, and that we hopefully extend the investment from the Olympics further, potentially to someplace like Palmdale, where we could take pressure off the LAX. So high-speed rail is not dead, but there has been a lot of conversation about how it is not being managed appropriately in California.
Congresswoman Brownley, let me ask you this, with cybersecurity being such a big issue, and I know you're both following this very, very closely, cybersecurity, especially as it relates to big infrastructure. Can you tell us what's in this bill to protect all these facilities that seem to be more vulnerable than ever now to cyber attack?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and it's an important one. The Senate bill, the bipartisan agreed upon Senate bill, is sort of an all-encompassing bill. So the Invest in America was surface transportation. The bipartisan Senate bill really addresses sort of two buckets: climate, hard infrastructure. Soft infrastructure is going to come in reconciliation. We can talk about that also. But a big component piece within the Senate bill, albeit I have not been able to read the language, but there is a top line number for cybersecurity. So this is a really important investment for our country, for our national security, and we've got to invest a lot more on the federal level. So this will be an important component in that bipartisan bill.
Assemblymember?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind commenting on cybersecurity. It happens that I head the select committee on cybersecurity. Yeah, it's in my wheelhouse. And also at the national level with the state legislatures. I'm the chair of that committee. And we did happen to have a hearing last week or 2 weeks ago on infrastructure and cybersecurity. It's highly complicated. As we become more and more automated, you have these SCADA systems that are now being connected to the internet, which means that they are much more vulnerable. So we need to have that investment at the federal level, and we also need to have a big investment in workforce. We have such an incredible shortage in all levels of cybersecurity, but the feds have been very good at setting up information sharing, and so that's the ability for all these different infrastructures, including utilities, to get information about the attacks that are currently going, and that's one big first step. But it is, it's very difficult for politicians because we don't really like to invest in something that is preventative. What we really like is to say, hey, I got money for a bridge, and here's the bridge, and we can have a ribbon cutting, and that is really important. But we also need to remember that things like preventing attacks on our water systems and on our electric grid are crucially important, even if our constituents don't see the result. I mean, the result is almost that nothing is happening to your water supply. So huge issue, and we appreciate the efforts at the federal level to get money in that budget.
Any other comments from the business leaders here regarding cybersecurity and how money might be best appropriated?
Well, yeah, I just want to add to that for private companies that are using, again, the grid and the fiber optics and all, they need to rely on a very, very strong network, and it's a big issue. And I'm spending days in warehouses where we're wondering, are we going to be able to support today, and do we have enough power for it? So, in the realm of cybersecurity, also just access to a good broadband network, just in general, and power grid is critical.
And then I just have to do a little public service announcement. The vast majority of attacks still, probably 90%, are employees that are clicking on links, email links, or text message links. That's how the access to the systems are found right now. So I would say for any of the private sector, for our schools, for businesses, it is critically important that employee education is part of protecting your networks.
I was just going to say we are lucky to have Jacqui in this capacity, because I will just say, she won't say, but I will say there are a lot of legislators that don't understand all of this, and it's nice to have someone who does. So I appreciate your leadership.
Yeah. And there seem to be other technology aspects to this bill. I had heard today that apparently car makers may be required to have some new technology in their vehicles as part of this bill to prevent drunk driving, as well as to prevent children from being left in hot cars and so forth. Any other insights, Congresswoman, that you could tell us about the technology aspect of this?
Well, and I'm sure many of you have read this in the news, but just the issues of microchips alone are impeding manufacturing, and particularly automotive manufacturing, quite considerably. And so this is a critical component that we need to address. That these, and it's difficult because the minerals that are needed, we don't want to mine in our country and all that sort of thing. But we've got to get to a place where we can build all of this within the United States and be American made. We can't depend on a global supply chain that we're, competing against China and other countries. So this is critically important, and there's no question that President Biden is a huge leader in terms of everything that he has proposed is focused around jobs, good paying jobs, but a make it in America. And so that's a tremendously strong focus in Congress right now. And I will say generally it's a bipartisan focus in Congress right now. But we have got to take a critical eye into all of those component pieces in the global supply chain that we are dependent upon and make sure that we can create them here in America.
And certainly we're all dependent on energy, and our electrical system here in California has been compared to the system of Cuba with these rolling blackouts and all these unfortunate tragedies that have occurred. Can you tell us how this will be improved under this bill?
This is sort of my wheelhouse, but being on the Select Committee for the Climate Crisis, so we've hit upon a little bit about EV stations, EV technology, and moving forward. So the Invest in America bill, the bill that the Senate has, various degrees on how much we invest in certain buckets, but there is a lot in there on EV infrastructure. And what is in the Senate bill that wasn't in the Invest in America Act, because the grid comes under a different committee's jurisdiction within Congress. So, but the grid, the resiliency of the grid, the strength of the grid, the expansion of the grid, it's like the delta is to water, the grid is to our electricity. In our country. And if we're going to build a clean energy economy, it's going to be dependent on a lot of clean energy sources, but the electricity piece is going to be critically important. So, some of our fires, Thomas Fire being the good example of a fire coming from electrical lines. So we've got to build resiliency into the system. Attacks from other countries to our electrical grid. If our country gets attacked, it will attack our grid or our water systems. That will be the attack. So it's important for a variety of reasons, but there are historic amounts of money in the bill focused on the grid in the bipartisan Senate bill, which I wholeheartedly support.
To the Assemblymember, yes.
Well, obviously, again, money from the feds is critically important. And we know in California, we are moving to zero emissions vehicles. The transportation grid right now is one of the biggest contributors to climate change. And we know there's a lot of countries across the world that have already committed to moving completely to electric vehicles. But that is not something that is going to work if we do not have the infrastructure, the charging stations, and if we do not build a more resilient grid. And right now we're when you're talking about blackouts, a lot of that is we're kind of at this crucial in-between stage that we have this incredible amount of solar being produced. And it at a certain point in the evening, it stops being produced. And in areas like this, you really see the demand in for air conditioning going, or people using their washing machines. Everybody who gets home and starts using the grid, it puts on the demand right at the time that solar is waning. And that's why I think we need to look. We have solar, obviously, which is really important, integrating that to the grid. We still are going to have transitions. We're not going to be able to eliminate, let's say, gas plants altogether, because we cannot have whole cities sitting in the dark because there is no transition fuel source. But the other thing which Mercy brought up that I think really is an incredible opportunity is the the wind turbines off the ocean. Obviously, you want to work with the military base. The area off our coast has a lot of, it would be very problematic in certain points to be putting these wind turbines, but we could benefit greatly from that. As I'm the co-author of a bill that is trying to facilitate the permitting on that. We could benefit greatly with high-paid blue-collar jobs if we end up being the port, Hueneme, that services these turbines, where if you have machinery that has to be replaced, that you would be able to set up something right here in Hueneme. So we're in a difficult transition period, but I think with the weather that we've seen this year around the world, I think there is a critical need to address this, stop putting our head in the sand, and know that it's going to be very difficult over the next few years doing that transition. But the investment needs to keep going, and we need to move forward.
And I just would like to add too on some of the same thought that Jacqui is pointing out. I mean, just think about wind turbines, being offshore, wind turbines being beyond the sight line, actually, out there in the middle of the ocean. It creates a whole new industry, really. I mean, building those things is incredible. Good paying jobs, and then servicing them. I mean, think about all of the technology that you need. You're going to need ships to go out to be able to, do the maintenance, to do the repairs. I mean, it's going to create something that doesn't even exist today, that will be really good paying jobs. And when we think about, weaning off of, fossil fuel into sort of clean energy, all of the fossil fuel and all of that drilling that takes place out in the ocean, and transitioning to a whole nother economy that will produce the same kind of good paying jobs and good for the environment, is definitely win-win.
Obviously, this unprecedented pandemic has changed all of our lives, and for many of us here, this is the first live event, although we are outdoors. Obviously, things have changed, and probably forever. As far as future construction and how plans look on the drawing board now, will the pandemic be a factor as far as maybe providing additional space or air filtration or ultraviolet protection of some sort? How's this pandemic impacting the future of infrastructure here in the U.S.?
I think it's hard to say exactly, but I think you're correct in your questioning that it will change. There's no question in my mind that telemedicine, for example, which I think will be sort of transformational in terms of receiving healthcare. Telehealth, telemedicine was widely used during the pandemic, and I've heard from physician after physician is that they want to be able to continue to utilize that. But I do think it is gonna change things quite considerably. It's hard to know, if we're going to go back to a traditional work setting, or are we not? There's going to be a lot, but I think in terms of, just moving around, whether you're working from home or going to your job, the more transit options that we have, the more we can develop, neighborhoods around transit systems, so people can easily move and move at a relatively inexpensively, is certainly the wave of the future. And again, doing all of those things, it's win-win, because it's also good for the environment.
Let me ask Fabien, our builder here, and then I'll turn it over to Mercy. Certainly, anecdotally, I've heard that plans on the drawing board have changed, construction plans in response to people wanting more space, for example. Is that what you're seeing here as well?
More space.
Yes, so right now we see obviously a surge in a lot of residential projects. A lot of people spent the last year at home trying to improve homes. So that was, they onboarded on those projects. They thought it was easy to remodel the kitchen. Then, they call companies like us after, because it's not that easy. But I want actually to upload one group of people. It's the city planners and the people that work at the desks. Every week, we apply for permits, we submit plans, and we need to get a stamp in order to do our construction work. And all those people overnight had to migrate from a process that was very physical, very you had to go to the city, you had to meet with a person, spend hours behind the counter, to now a process that is using FTPs and using Dropboxes and a lot of technology when now we can review plans and get permits approvals very quickly, done just like that overnight, almost, by people who have adopted technology with very minimum training, and they had to adapt to that. And that, I think, is another great opportunity. It's probably the only good thing that came out of COVID is to see those cities adopting to that, but we need to support them.
Okay, let's go back a little bit. When the pandemic first hit, I think those tradesmen and women in the trades who have been a part of an apprenticeship or at least a program where companies have implemented safety and skill and trained into the program, they're able to adapt. So I know a lot of trades like ourselves, we adapted with we created like a better commitment with our contractors. First things first, right? Put on a mask, not cross-contaminate tools. They're on the bigger projects, they're changing the hours of operation as far as like when start times are. So you don't have 100 tradesmen coming into the job site at the same time, splitting up the shifts, not knowing who you're carpooling with, trying to just basically stay more healthy. Stay apart, and when you're close to somebody, you have to mask up. And now we're seeing a new wave. We're seeing owners, developers, contractors requesting crews that have been vaccinated, and it could create a new trend where people might be able to go to work on certain jobs because of the vaccination, feeling that the owners and developers feel that they're safer on the job, along with all the other protocols that have been put in place. So there's a lot of things that have changed, but we've been very fortunate that we continue to keep working. In the beginning, when everybody else was staying home, the freeways were wide open and we're getting a lot done going to and from work. But now we're just adapting to it, making sure we're safe, we're healthy, we're masked up, we're keeping our tools clean, and we do it as safe and productive as we can. And the vaccination is going to help. And if those that want to get vaccinated and be on that list to get on that job, then they'll do it. The ones that still have their concerns, then they won't be on those specific jobs.
Regarding public transportation, let me ask you, Darren, you can say obviously the highest priority now.
Well, public transit was impacted probably more so than just about any industry through the pandemic. Well, when you're told to stay home, you're probably not taking a bus or a train. And bus systems not hit as hard as train systems. Metrolink, as an example, lost 90% of its ridership right out of the gate. But there were still those riders that were essential. A lot of the commuters that were going in were essential employees. So transit still served an important purpose. And now we have a job of bringing it back. And part of bringing it back is making sure that people know it's healthy and safe. We all have cleaning protocols that we've instituted. If you were to go to Metrolink's website, you would see the nature of the cleaning protocols that happen. We do the same thing with our big blue VCTC intercity buses as we start to recover ridership as people do go back to work. So it's going to be critically important to make sure that we continue to do that. Otherwise, we won't get our riders back, and we will just find ourselves in greater gridlock. So certainly, public transit's got to adjust. We have adjusted, and I think you're going to just continue to see those types of protocols continue to make sure it stays safe.
Thank you. As we start to wind down this discussion, Dr. Apfelthaler, any final thoughts here as far as the impact of the business community here and among the movers and shakers you talked to here at Cal-Lu? What do you want to see from all this?
Well, I would say as a regional university, we depend on a vibrant regional economy, right? So if the infrastructure bill does what it's supposed to do, to create jobs, to fix the infrastructure, we are going to benefit in the short run in very direct terms too, right? So I'm thinking of, we had multiple wildfires in the past years, right? So fire mitigation, I understand, is part of the bill. It helps our students and our faculty members to stay focused if they don't have to worry whether or not the house is still intact, right? Access to broadband was so important in the last year. We saw that we are a private institution, often perceived as more on the expensive side, but we have a lot of students who come from circumstances where they do not have access to broadband. Electricity, having a stable grid, right? Very important for a university to keep the lights on and to make sure that our students are not broiling in a 90-degree dorm room. So there are going to be some very direct effects for which I'm really grateful for. But I'm also hoping that as a university, we're in the people business. We love to talk about things such as education of workforce and research. In the future, I'm also hoping that we're investing more into the human side, and also not just on the early childhood education, also in K through 12, and also in higher education and research.
Thank you very much, Dr. Apfelthaler. And the final thought here from Assemblymember Irwin, and one question from the audience: will the 101 be widened in Westlake Village?
I don't know. Hey, that's in your lane.
All right, so yeah, you've got me for whatever 3-4 more weeks. So yeah, so VCTC is the lead agency on a environmental engineering for widening the 101 from the 23 freeway here in the Thousand Oaks, Conejo Valley area, all the way to the 33, which is the route up to Ojai. It's about 30 miles of highway widening. The environmental document will be released later this year. The price tag to add a lane in the middle of the freeway and some lanes on the outside. When I say lanes, it's not just free flow traffic lanes, it's express bus and carpool lanes, recognizing what Congresswoman mentioned about the importance of emissions reduction so that we are reducing the number of trips. That's the good news. We are doing that. However, the slightly more challenging news is the price tag is somewhere between $900 million and $1 billion to do 30 miles of freeway improvements. But that's music to the ears of people like Mercy, who's got a whole bunch of people that need to get to work. Transportation infrastructure is an amazing investment in our economy, and we see it that way.
Well, that is big. Thank you for sharing that big news.
Please.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay. I'll just wrap it up really quick, and because I feel like I interrupted you there. I think that, you know, the amount of money going into communities in California varies by area, and a lot of the reason it varies is because it depends on how good a job your elected officials do for you, and how good a job local government and businesses do in keeping in touch with us, so that we know what the needs are and that we know where we can help with letters for grant funding, or you know, talking to our budget chair, or working with committees. So it's just critically important that Ventura County continue, and our little portion of LA County, Brad, that we all continue to work together. This doesn't just happen overnight. It is advocates that talk about the important projects, that talk about the need at our universities, that talk about the need for early childhood education, and then come to us and let us know how we can assist. And I have the best partner I could possibly have at the federal level with Congresswoman Brownley, but we will continue to do everything we can to bring resources into the community.
And Congressman, we're talking about the biggest infrastructure bill since the Interstate Highway Project. Is this going to be like our Futurama? What is it going to look like out there?
Well, I think you know, there are moments in time in our history where we have opportunities to do something bold and transformative. And I think we are in that moment. And now we've just got to get the ball over the finish line. But we're talking about in Congress, I think, on both sides of the aisle on most things. And with reconciliation, we have the sort of the backup to do some of the soft infrastructure that we haven't talked a lot about here today, but also critically important. But I think we have the opportunity again to do something big, bold, and transformative. And I will just like to add one thing on the soft infrastructure. We're talking about childcare. We're talking about family leave. We're talking about preschool. We're talking about making the child tax credit permanent. Making the child tax credit permanent lifts half of America's children out of poverty. Women were severely impacted by the pandemic. Men and women were severely impacted but women were very much impacted. And when we talk about infrastructure and creating good jobs, it's going to create good jobs for men and women, but it's going to create more jobs for men than it is for women. So we need to support women with childcare, with taking care of elders, so that women can get back into the workforce. Women get back into the workforce, it strengthens our economy and we move forward. So it's just not out there because it's a moral imperative from some people's perspectives or not. It really is an economic investment moving to the future.
Congresswoman Brownley, State Assemblymember Irwin, and all of our panelists, thank you very much for participating in this important discussion today on the new infrastructure bill. I wish you all the best and all the best of health. And again, thank you very much for everyone here at Cal-Lu for hosting us here today for this important discussion. I'm Frank Mottek. Thank you very much for joining us here and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
There are over 4,000 students at California Lutheran University.
Each with our own unique backgrounds, upbringings, and beliefs.
We don't look the same or think the same.
But we do share one thing in common.
We're open.
Open to learning about the world.
Open to exploring new ideas.
And open to discovering our purpose.
Because when you're open,
the world is open to you.